Hello and welcome to Creative Sparkle. My name's Holly and today we're going to be doing an art journal page prompt list. So get your art supplies together and let's get crafting. So we're starting off by gessoing the page just because I'm working in a recycled book. So the first prompt that we're going to start off with is to start the background using tissue paper. Just to let you know, if you want the full prompts list, go to the end of the video and then you can go through all the prompts unless you want to do them step by step with me. So the tissue paper that I'm using for the prompt is one of the packs that you can get. It's a pattern for dressmaking, things like that. It's just something I had, so I thought I'd give that one a go. And I'm going to use Mod Podge to stick it down. Whatever tissue paper you have is absolutely fine. You could use a plain colour, or you can stamp on tissue paper, put patterns on it yourself. There are plenty of patterned tissue papers that you can find in stores. Supermarkets have tissue paper with patterns all over it, as I'm sure you'll see in a future video. So I'm just sticking it down with Mod Podge. If you don't have Mod Podge, any glue works absolutely fine. You can use clear gesso, something like that, to stick it down. You could even use a Pritt stick, if you know, just a glue stick. If that's what you've got, then that's absolutely fine. Just use that. You don't have to go out and buy things that you don't have. Just use what you've got, and we'll be able to make a good page together. So don't worry about that. So I'm going to come back to you once all this is stuck down, and we'll move on to the next prompt. Obviously, as you can see, I'm just tearing up pieces of tissue paper to stick down. I haven't really got a plan, just putting it down wherever I can. So if you don't want to do that, if you want it to look a little bit more organised, you can just get the tissue paper and try and make it look flat over the page. But for this project, I just wanted to give it a bit of a less organised look so that it's got some oomph to it, give it a bit of a pattern. So once we've finished with the tissue paper, we'll just trim the edges with some scissors. You can use water just to tear it off if you don't want to use scissors, or you can stick it onto the page behind, just to give it that bit more of a tidy look, to move on to the next prompt. So for prompt number 2, we've got cover the spread with a thin layer of gesso or paint. I've chosen two colours here, latte and chocolate. So these paints, I'm just dripping them around and I'm just going to apply them. I did try with a paintbrush first of all, but I wasn't really feeling what it was showing me, so I decided to go with the baby white because that gives it more of a translucent look. So I'm just adding paint just to give it that layer over the top, and then it kind of brings it all together and gives it a bit more of a cohesiveness with the colours. Any paint that you've got does absolutely fine. Depending on what tissue paper that you've used for your background, you can use any colours that you like, really. This kind of sets the tone for the rest of the page. So because I'm using the lighter beige and brown colours, it just kind of gives it that earthy tone. So when I move on to the next prompt, we'll see what it is, and then we'll move on from there. Done, we need to move on to the next prompt. So the prompt after this one is to either use Zentangle or patterns over the background. So I've chosen to use stamps that I've got, just background stamps with patterns over them, and then I'm going to use Archival ink in Sepia to stamp the first stamp. You can use any pen or anything like that if you want to just do Zentangles if you don't have stamps like this, just something to add a pattern. You could even use, you know, like a lid or some kind of shape that you've found that you just want to dip into paint or ink and then stamp it onto the page that way, and that would still, you know, bring a pattern to the page as well. But yeah, Zentangling is absolutely fine. If all you've got is a pen to use or something like that, you can use that. So I'm moving on to the second stamp now and struggling. Looks like it's the first time I've used this one. So I'm using the coffee colour in Archival ink to stamp this image, just so I've got two more earthy tones to add to the page. So that's that one done. And the next prompt is to choose a focal image that's not a person for one page. So because this is a double page prompt list, you choose an image to go on one page and then there'll be prompts to go to the other page. So this is an image that I found in a colouring book. I believe that my auntie gave me it. Shout out to Auntie T. So I used watercolours to colour this image, and then I'm just sticking it down with some foam tape after cutting it out, as you can see. So I'm just using tweezers to get the backing off the foam tape, and then I'll stick that down and move on to the next prompt. So now that that's stuck down, the next prompt is for on the other page to do an outline of a person or a figure. So that's the reason we didn't want the focal image in the last one to be a person, because this one is more related to a person. So I'm starting off, I was practicing in my sketchbook what kind of positions I wanted to draw and things like that. So I'm just attempting, and you'll see why I say that in a moment, I'm just attempting to use tracing paper to get the image down, but unfortunately that didn't work, so I've had to get some carbon paper. You know, you could freehand onto the page if you wanted to, if you don't have the supplies that I have to hand. But yeah, anything that if you're tracing paper, you just need to maybe use a darker pencil or a charcoal or something if it doesn't work for you like it hasn't for me. But yeah, I'm just using the carbon paper now to trace that through and just checking that it's done properly. So once that's done, I then go on to use a Jelly Roll pen and just do the outline with that, just so that it stands out a bit more and then it's not going to get faded or smudged or anything like that. So for the next prompt, we're going to start by adding shadows and highlights to the image. So this could mean anything on the page, or it could mean the focal image that you've done. I've actually, because I've coloured in this ship in a bottle, because it's already coloured, I wanted to add the shadows to the outside to show that it's more grounded to the page. And then once that's done, I will add some shadows to my figure as well that I drew onto the page, and then we'll move on. Probably should have mentioned before, I'm using an Inktense pencil, just in black, and washing it down just to get those effects. So any charcoal or pencil even that you've got, anything, even watercolours if you have those, just anything to get that shadow. And we want a translucent kind of effect so that it doesn't the opacity doesn't take over the image. So for the highlights I'm using the gel pen, and I do go back, and where it wasn't quite bright enough I use a Tipp-Ex pen as well, which is like a whiteout. So once that's done, we'll move on to creating a border using scrap paper. So I looked through my scrap paper just to see what kind of things that I wanted to use. I did decide on this script one. I have a scrap paper folder, so I just dug through there, and I'm just tearing it apart so that I can make a border with this. It took me a really long time to decide on what I wanted to do for this prompt, but when I finally got there, I'm just tearing pieces out just so that they can fit around the outside. I'm using a distress tool to try and distress the edges a bit, just to give it a bit more of an organic look, and then once I've torn all the pieces of paper, and then move on to inking the paper, just because I don't feel like it fits with the background just yet. So I'll use, as you can see here, walnut stain distress ink and then the sepia archival ink. So on one side I'll do the sepia, and that side will go for the inside of the page, and then the walnut stain will look so it's on the outside of the page. So I've done that for every single one of these pieces of scrap paper, and then I'll stick them down onto the page with Mod Podge as well, the same one that I used earlier. But again, any glue or anything that you have to stick it down will work. Clear gesso, PVA glue, you know, school glue, whatever you have to hand, absolutely fine. Just stick it down with whatever you've got. So once that's all stuck down, we'll move on to the next prompt, which is adding twine, thread or string to your page. So anything that you've got around your house, whatever you have available to you. So I found this little cutting pad in a set that I have, and I also have this it's like a poker tool, I guess, from a craft knife set. So I'm just making holes to make it look like the man's going to be holding the string, and then wrapping it around the cork on the ship in the bottle, just so it brings the page together a bit and gives it a bit more oomph. I tend to like that word, I don't know why. But I'm just sticking that down so that it's secured to the cork, and then I'll thread it through the page where the hand is, so that it stays where it's supposed to be. And I thought I chose blue because I thought that would bring together the scene in the bottle as well, because I don't really have any other blue on the page. But again, anything that you want to do with the string, you don't have to connect it to your focal images if you don't want to. You could just pile it up and stick it down in the background, or you could wrap it around your focal image if you wanted to, or just underline your focal image, give it a ground to stand on or something like that. You don't have to incorporate it into your images like I have here. So we're getting close to the end of the page now. So the next prompt is to add a quote, word or title to your page. So I have picked something already. Usually I would say either choose a prompt list or the quote before you start the page, and it gives you some kind of inkling as to what you might feel goes onto your page. Obviously sometimes prompts won't allow for you to do a full quote, it might just be a word for a title or something like that, but you can change any prompts that you like. You know, if it's more preferable to you to do just a one-word title, then that's fine. I mean, the prompt allows for this on this occasion, but if it's not something that you want to follow, then fine, it's your art journal page. The prompts are there just to give us a bit of ease, and when you follow the prompt list, it's just so much easier just to have something already telling you what to do. So here I'm attempting again to stamp my quote on the page, and it's not working very well, so I had to go for a different plan. Again, it took me a while to work out what I wanted to do with it, so I ended up getting some card and stamping on there, and then using the same inks that I used for the scrap paper on the border to add some colour to the words that I'm using for the quote, and then I'll distress the edges as well, and stick those down for my title. And then we'll move on to the next prompt after that. If you don't have stamps or anything like that, written quote or title, absolutely fine. Whatever you have available to you, again, I'll probably say that a lot, but whatever you have available to you is absolutely fine. And if you can't think of something to write, you know, Pinterest has a wild array of titles and quotes and things like that you can use, so you're not short of ideas for things like that. You know, if you wanted something to relate to a boat in a bottle, I'm sure you could find it. But I don't know how I've got a book where I write down quotes that I think are suitable or encouraging, something like that. So I just go through the book and see if anything stands out to me, and if not, then I'll go and search for a new one. But that's how I found the quote for mine today. Yeah, so after I've distressed these edges, I'm going to ink them up again just so that there's no white edges, and then I'll stick those down after I've added the second part of the quote with the rub-ons that I was using earlier that you saw. So then after I've scrunched them up as well. Yeah, I forgot about that part. I scrunched them up and then stuck them down, and I was pretty happy with the result, to be honest. I think it's not what I was imagining in my mind, but now that it's finished, I think I like it better than what the original plan was, so that's always a plus. All stuck down, and the final prompt that we're going to move on to is add black or white splatters, sorry. So you just want to get some paint of white or black, mix it with water, and then spray it onto the page. You can see that I have actually added white splatters already. Unfortunately, I have forgotten to record while I was doing that, so I'm afraid I can't share that part with you. But I did decide, the prompts are done now, so I did decide that when I'm looking at the page, I thought it was finished, but you can't actually see the letters that are on the quote, so I wanted to go over it with a bit more highlighting from one of the prompts earlier. Again, if it wasn't in the prompts, that's absolutely fine. If you feel like you need to add something to the page and it's not on a prompt, fine, absolutely fine, do it. It's your art journal page, and if you're happy with the result, then that's the main thing. The prompts are just there to help you. So as the page is finished, I'll show you some pictures for the end. Mind my noggin coming into the angle there. You can see my glasses. So I'm happy with the result. I hope you are happy with this video. If you like the video, please press the like button, subscribe if you want more prompt lists, and press the notification bell so that you'll know next time one comes in. The prompts list is at the end, so if you want to pause it and just take a snapshot or write them down, and I will hopefully see you next time. Thank you again. Bye!